Hey guys, it's Prince Rich with Rich Technology Group, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about what are the top 3 best internet speed tests online. Now, I felt like this was a really important one because I have a lot of people that I run into across the United States that are like, I'm paying this much for Comcast, or I'm paying this much for Verizon, or whoever it may be, Spectrum Business, Suddenlink, and I'm just not getting what I'm supposed to be getting. And then they tell me that it's my fault and that they're delivering it and so on and so forth. So the reason that I felt this video would be important, not only for the people that are using carriers such as the ones that I've mentioned, I personally have dealt with some woes with some non-broadband carriers in the past and present, like satellite carriers, wireless internet carriers, and things like that, DSL, you name it, where a lot of times I hate to put them under the bus, but you quite literally aren't getting the speeds that you're supposed to be getting because of the fault of the provider, not because of fault of your own. So that being said, we're going to go over and I'm going to show you here in a screen cap, but I'm going to also put the links in the bottom of this video on our YouTube channel and on our website so you can use these tests, as you please. I'm going to show you the 3 most reliable tests that I have seen on the market, and I've used hundreds and hundreds of them. I've even used some to be able to get out of contract when my provider just could not deliver what the contract dictated they said that they could deliver. So anyways, without any more ado, let's get into it. Number 3 is Speedtestnet. Let's head over to Speedtestnet and I'll let you guys see these. Speedtestnet, for any of you that are watching that have used Speedtest before, or especially if you're watching and you're like an IT professional or the person that manages the internet for a business or whatever it may be, surely enough you know what Speedtestnet is. They're one of the biggest ones out there. They're not number 1 on my list, and we'll get into why in a little bit, but they are one of the most common ones. So we'll go ahead and do a quick speed test here so you can see how it works. Now, for those of you who may or may not know, keep in mind that we are home based out of Richmond, Virginia, but I also have a home and home office in Costa Rica as well. So for those of you that are watching this that are like, oh my God, 12 megabits down, if you saw where I lived in the middle of nowhere where my house in Costa Rica is, you'd be shocked that I get internet at all. So for the purposes of this video, just understand that I have wireless broadband, or what us technical people call microwave internet, at my house in the mountains in Costa Rica. In the States, we use Comcast, so we get 30 megabits and above. But anyways, for the purposes of this, you guys are going to get to see pretty much how reliable it is, even with an internet that's not as good as like a Comcast or Verizon. So basically, as you can see, that test just completed, and I am getting 12.92 megabytes download and 6.36 up. That's actually excellent. Again, if you see where I literally live in the middle of nowhere farm country at my Costa Rica home office. In the States, I'm over in Richmond, Virginia, which for those of you who know Richmond, it's the capital of Virginia. You can get anything, Verizon Fios, Comcast, T1, Windstream, you name it. But for the purposes of this, it's showing that I have a 12 millisecond ping, 12.92 megabits download, which is actually excellent because I'm only paying for 5.5 megabit download with my microwave internet provider, my wireless broadband provider, and I'm only paying for 2.5 megabits upload, which is more than enough for my small office at this particular location. So as you can see, it's showing a little bit higher than what it probably should be. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about Speedtestnet that you need to be aware of. This is one that the providers, because I've worked with all the providers, even some international providers outside of the United States, this is one that the providers will typically favor, and that is not a good thing. The reason that the providers will typically favor this one is because this one will typically, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because it always connects to servers that are closer to the provider versus closer to you. But this particular speed test, while it tends to be very reliable in most cases, it tends to, I'm not really sure what the term to put on it. It tends to kind of exalt or put steroids on what the provider's speed is. So I would say sometimes, yeah, it can be accurate if you're using a broadband connection, or say like a Verizon Fios connection or fiber connection through Spectrum or Comcast, or something like that, like an actual in the ground, like wired connection, like broadband, fiber, whatever it may be, or DSL. It tends to be pretty accurate. But when you start getting into some of your stuff like wireless, satellite, broadband, or things like that, it tends to actually favor the provider a little bit and misrepresent what your test actually is. So how do you get around that? Well, we're only on number 3. We haven't gotten to number 2 and number 1. But again, if you're somebody who's using a wired connection, this is a very good one, Speedtestnet. More importantly, one of the things that I like about Speedtestnet is that it shows your provider. My provider here is Boomerang Wireless, which is an excellent provider that, even though they're an international provider, they actually use level 3 subterranean connections that go overseas. So it is feeding off of actual fiber circuits from the United States. But it shows my actual IP address here, which is my IP address. And it also shows an overall rating for your provider from the area, for people that have used the test as well and given the provider a rating from 1 to 5. It also shows you, you'd be surprised how many customers I talk to that call me up and are looking for internet options, or they're asking about their internet, and I ask them, what do you use for your internet and what is your speed? And they say, I don't know. This is a great resource if you're not sure who your carrier is, like if you work for a company, so you didn't necessarily make the internet decision, but you're trying to figure out what you have and what the speed is. This is a great one to use, not only just to find out what your speeds are and your ping. It's great to find out who your provider is, who your provider is, what your IP address is, and what their overall rating worldwide is. Another thing I wanted to point out is you can change the server with their settings. So like if you click this, it'll show you other servers that are potentially in your area. So if you want to pick another server, if you think it's favoring a server that's farther away, you can actually do that to get a variation of the different tests and whatnot, for whatever service you may be getting, and so on and so forth. So it does have some flexibility in that arena. So anyways, Speedtestnet is number 3. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is TestMyNet. I have used this one for quite some time, and I'm going to run it here. When you go to testmy.net, it will actually start the test. So let me refresh it here so you guys can kind of see how it works. The reason that I like testmy.net is because a lot of times you can do a speed test, and the speed test can say that your download speed is XYZ, but that may not actually be what it is. What's TestMyNet, I keep getting these names all messed up. What TestMy.net does is it takes a sample, and you can even go to different parts on their page and do different passes. It takes a sample that it feels is large enough to download in a reasonable amount of time based on what it has predetermined your internet in your area is, and it downloads it. I like it because it kind of gives you a visual representation of what your actual download speed is for the actual size of whatever it is that they downloaded. More importantly, with that little bar that you just saw there, you can see if your download has pauses and things. Like if it gets up to, let's say, 60% and then it stops and hangs, that is a clear indication right there that yes, even though your provider may be providing what you signed the contract for, be it 20 megabits download, 30 megabits, 100 megabits, you may have some ping issues. So if you use this one, testmy.net, and it tells you, for example, that you've got a 50 megabyte download connection, but when you see that bar, that progress bar going, you see that it is pausing or something like that, or it's slowing down and then going and then slowing down and then going, that means you've got some ping issues and you need to get with your provider on that. Now, while we're on that subject, some ping issues can come from your network. Typically, they'll come from the provider, but sometimes they can come from your internal network, like some faulty wiring or a bad router. So I just want to throw that out there before we put too much heat on the providers. But it at least gives you a starting point if you realize that things on your network are uploading or downloading slow. And when you do a speed test, it's saying that you get 50 megabits or 100 megabits or whatever it is you're paying for. It could be, a gigabit internet. But if you see, like I said, when you use testmy.net, you see that there's pausing like that, that basically means you've got some ping problems, whether it be network or provider. Either way, you know you've got some latency issues on the network that are causing a very poor ping. One of the other things with TestMyNet that I like is, as you guys can see, it not only tells me that I'm getting an 11.6 megabit download. Back to the first one we looked at Speedtestnet, you notice this one's a bit more accurate, and this is why this one's number 2. Because this one is a bit more accurate, and this is the one that I've used in the past to have to deal with providers that are trying to undercut me or undercut my clients and not give them the speeds that they're paying for. You notice this one's a little lower. It's probably a bit more accurate to what I really am getting versus where Speedtestnet was saying I was getting 16 megs or whatever. It shows my speed. It shows my average, which my average is somewhere around 4.4 megabits 164% of the time. It says that 56% of the time my average is around 7.5 megabits, which is still not bad for this office because we don't have a ton of devices in here. And it more than suffices for our voice over IP phone system and the other devices I've got in here. You can see that it says in my city. Now here's what's interesting. This is actually really good for those of you who may be in an area where you feel like you're paying for a certain amount of speed, but you feel like the other people in your metropolitan area or in your office park, your general vicinity or in the neighborhood where your home office might be are sucking up your bandwidth. This speed test will also tell you 41% of the persons in you are 41% average of my city averages in my metropolitan area, which that's kind of funny because I live in the boondocks. My metropolitan area, the average in the city is approximately 19.7 megabits. And then it says in the country, the average for me is approximately 20.4 megabits in comparison to the 11.6 that I'm getting. And then I'm a 71% average of the 40 megabit average worldwide. So not too bad. Again, like I said, those of you who are laughing, if you saw where I'm at, you'd wonder how we even have internet potentially running water to begin with. So for us, it suffices. So anyways, the other thing that's nice about TestMyNet is they also have a really nice, for the speed test that it did, it also has a really nice, like, over the course of so much time. I've used this speed test for years just to keep tabs on my providers. So I can actually see kind of like a day-to-day, week-to-week, over the year, what type of average speeds that I've been getting. So again, if you use this like once a day or a couple of times a week, it'll give you some data that you can use if you feel the need to go back to your provider and be able to show them raw data that you're being undercut. What I do advise that you guys do, especially for those of you that are watching this that are on a fiber circuit or T1, you're paying a lot of money for internet, before you open up a ticket and start a quarrel with the ISP, I recommend that you definitely have your IT provider check your network. Make sure there's nothing on your network that may be causing a rises and drops in your internet speed. Then, coupled with the word and the documentation from your IT provider or your IT operations people within your organization, then do a test like this over time. Most providers, especially the ones that want to keep your business and keep a customer happy, they will take the data that you present to them from your IT guys' findings that kind of say, hey, there's nothing wrong with this network that we feel is causing an internet problem, plus the raw data that you have here from a test like this, especially if you have raw data from one or more tests like I'm going over in this video, they'll usually kind of cave and say, hey, maybe we'll get a technician internally or on site to see what's going on and see if we can improve your service. So anyways, again, back to what I was saying, you can see here that I've done multiple tests today on June the 19th. I've done multiple tests today, and it's shown like kind of what my averages have been. So I've been jumping up and down between 11 megabits, 11 and a half, approximately 11 and a half, 13, almost 10, so on and so forth, which is pretty good considering it's wireless broadband through the air. So anyways, moving on. So number one, and this is the one that I have used the most, I actually had a previous satellite broadband provider, which was horrible. That was constantly telling me, oh, Mr. Rich, it's your network, it's not us. I was getting everything from 1 megabit download when I was paying for 5. There were days, guys, where I was getting literally like megabit download, 0.5 megabit. I mean, not even enough to stream Netflix, and in some cases, not even enough to send and receive email correctly, let alone use our voice over IP phone system in-house and all that. And so this is the test that I ended up being able to actually break a contract. I was in a 2-year agreement with the company, and I was actually able to provide them raw data and break a contract. This is the best one. I don't care if you're overseas using broadband wireless T1. I have found it to be the most accurate, and number one is Speedofme. So let's go ahead and run it here so you guys can see it. So go ahead and start the test. You can see that it's showing my latency, which is just another term for ping. This is probably actually more accurate. If you guys remember back earlier in the video, when I did the ping test with Speed.net, which is the one that I told you is a little more like it kind of like overdoes the results. It's not as accurate in my opinion. It was saying that my ping was 16 milliseconds, which that's absolutely not true, especially not with me having wireless broadband. It's going through the air. I've got a point-to-point connection that literally hits a tower that is straight out in front of me, out this window that you guys obviously can't see in this video. But as you can see, I'm getting 11.3 megabytes download with a latency of 69 milliseconds. That's a little high. My provider is usually somewhere in the ballpark of about I want to say approximately about 40. I usually average around about 43 millisecond ping, which is really good for where I'm at, especially using a wireless broadband service that's going through the air. Right now it says 69, which is kind of high, but I usually like to keep it between about 43 and 50 because that usually ensures that my voice over IP phones have no static or breakup. They sound crystal clear as if I'm talking to somebody locally in the USA when I'm on this side of the border. You can see that this used a test server that was in Miami. Let's see here. So 11.3 megabit download, 6.57 megabit upload, which is really good. For those of you who are watching down here, the one reason that I really like this test is because it did multiple passes when it was doing the test. We'll go ahead and hit it and tell it to do a test again so you can see. It actually takes a sample download and it does multiple passes. So you can see pass 6, it'll do pass 7. I think it goes up to pass 10, and then it starts with the upload, and then it will do again pass 1, pass 2, pass 3. So it gives you like a little graph that you can see over here to the right that will basically kind of show it'll basically give you like a comparison so that you can see the fluctuation in your connection. Again, those of you who are using some sort of wireless technology, I mean, you could even do this on a cell phone, by the way, while we're at this. If you're trying to test to make sure you're getting the correct LTE or 4G speeds through your cell phone provider, this is actually great because, as I mentioned, for those of you on a cable connection, on a wired connection like T1 DSL cable, your speed won't fluctuate much because it's on an actual hard line. But for those of us who are using satellite wireless or a cell phone, it's got a little bit of fluctuation in it, and that's important because that fluctuation is also going to dictate what your ping is. So again, this one is the number one. Again, I've used it to get out of contracts before with providers that were clearly not providing what they offered. Before we go and end this video, the top 3 internet speed tests online, I want to throw you guys in a little bonus, and I want to just kind of go into something here. Back to what I kind of touched on lightly in the beginning of this video, I don't care if your service provider is giving you a gigabit of download speeds. If you have really crappy ping, back to that provider that I had to oust, there were times where I called them up, got really mad, and said, if you guys don't get my internet speed sorted out, my service, I'm gonna bail. They were never able to get their ping right, and there were times where I was getting as high as 25 megabits download steady, but my ping was 3,000 milliseconds. Or there was one time, and I even screenshot it, and I know for those of you that are going to be watching this that are IT professionals, you're going to laugh your butt off. There were times I actually screenshotted. I was getting 13,000 and 27,000 millisecond ping with these guys, but it was saying I had 25 megabit download. I don't care if you've got 6 gigabit or 10 gigabit download speed through your provider. Once your ping starts going into the hundreds and higher, I would say once it breaks about 80 to 100 and higher, it doesn't matter what your speeds are. Your latency is so bad, it's gonna cause most websites to time out because they're gonna think you're trying to DOS attack them or something because of security risk. It's gonna cause most websites to time out. It's gonna cause things like email and whatnot to send, and you'll get messages from Gmail and Outlook that say the remote server timed out, not because the remote server timed out, but because your internet sucks and it took that long for your service provider signal to relay to where it needs to go. So I wanted to give you guys one of the best ping tests that I know of on the market, and I'm going to show you why. And I use this all the time. As you can see, my ping is going to fluctuate a little bit because, again, I'm on a broadband thing. As long as my ping stays around, I would say about 50 to 80 and doesn't go over 100, I'm happy. So the nice thing about this test is, and they do have a speed test on here, by the way, as well, but I don't recommend it as highly as I do the previous three in this video. So the nice thing about this thing is you can get speed tests again and again and again, and you have a variable comparison. If you're having problems with your internet service provider with ping, what you need to do is you need to come to this website, www.meter.net. You need to go to the ping tester, and I recommend you do at least 3 or 4 takes of the ping test. Once you get that, take a screenshot of all of this and send this to your provider, and they cannot say that everything is okay and that the problem is not there. They can come back and say the problem is on your end and something on your network is causing latency issues. That's great. Get your IT guys to check out your network, and then if your network checks out okay, I insist that you demand that they look at these results and investigate it further and figure out what's going on with your service and give you the service that you deserve that you're paying for. So anyways, that concludes this video, the top 3 speed tests online to test your internet speeds, or should we say the top 3 most accurate that I know of. For any of you that have any questions about your internet provider and why you may be having issues with rising and falling speeds and things like that, drop me an email, give me a shout, let me know what I can do to help. Again, don't forget, we represent all internet service providers for business and phone system providers on the market. Let me know if you need any help or if you'd like any recommendations or like any pricing. And also don't forget to subscribe to our video. Again, this is Prince Rich with Rich Technology Group, and I'll chat with you guys again in the next video.